morning everyone, hope you're all having a wonderful day today. First off, I would like to thank you all. I just recently hit 10,000 subscribers, and if you're not aware, I'm doing a giveaway. So basically I'm giving away one of my AR style upper receivers. I believe there's 6 of them up for grabs. All you have to do is go like the photo of the Iliad by Homer, of course, which is this photo, or this book here, sorry, this is a Franklin Library Classics edition, which is really, it's a sweet book, leather bound, very beautiful. But what you need to do is you need to go like that photo on Instagram, or if you don't use Instagram, you can also just email me and I will pick a number at random and one of you will be selected to win an upper receiver of your choice. You get to decide which one of the 6 upper receivers you want to get. Most of them don't come with the Optic, some of them do. The one we're talking about today actually does come with the Optic. So I need to get this video done, so that's why we are doing a discussion on the UTG 1-8. This is the 1-8 power. Now, I've already done a video on the 1-8 power, but specifically this one here is going to be the circle dot reticle. Before we get straight into that, one thing that I do want to mention is that I did also open up a Subscribestar account. Basically, Subscribestar is just a pro to a Patreon, so there'll be a lot of content on there that I can't post on YouTube due to YouTube's terms of service. So there will be stuff there. So if you want to support me and the channel, you can go to there and subscribe on Subscribestar for like $2, $5, or $10 a month. Or if not, just like, share, subscribe, all that sort of stuff helps me out a lot. But let's go ahead and start talking about this Optic. First up, let's go ahead and talk about some of the features of the Optic. So basically, it's their standard 1-8 lineup. So it's about 18.9 ounces, so just under 20 ounces. It's about 10 inches long, and it uses turrets that have a 1/2 MOA or 1/2 inch at 100 yards. Now these turrets are actually fairly good. You can probably hear them just fine. They're not the sharpest, most tactile things in the world, but they do work. Now, they are also lockable and resettable turrets, so on an Optic that costs $150, or in this case, I got this Optic for $50 because I believe they're discontinuing this model because it sells so poorly, and there's a reason for that, but we will get into that later. But the turrets on here are much nicer than the price tag. And also on top of that, something that I mentioned in my other video on the 1-8s is the glass quality is also very, very good. Specifically, when comparing it to the Vortex, this is the Strike Eagle Gen 2 1-8, the glass quality is actually very comparable on 1X. And on 8X, there is a noticeable reduction in quality on the UTG 1-8, but it's only about 10 to 15%. So it's not a huge jump, but it is a huge jump in price from about $150 to $350, $400. So keep that in mind. The glass quality on the Strike Eagles and better scopes are of course better, but they're not crazy amounts better, and it is definitely still usable at 8X. Now, something else to note about this scope is that you have an extremely generous eye relief at 1X. At 1X, you basically have anywhere from like 3.5 to 5.5 inches in which your eye box will work just fine. Now, one thing to note, the 1X on here is not super flat, so there is some warping in close range. So like inside of 5 yards, you will really notice it. But outside of 5 yards, once you get out past 10 or 15, it really becomes unnoticeable, and it's really only at the very edges. So the 1X on the 1-8s are very usable. I've used them on both of my AR-10s, AR-15s. I have one on an ACR. They're very, very usable. The problem with this Optic, and this is going to be my main gripe about it before we talk about anything else, is the reticle. The reticle on it is pretty much abysmal, and it's the reason why most people just wouldn't buy one. So the reticle on here, which I suppose they tried to design it for CQB, is a very simple circle dot design. So almost like an EOTech, you have a very sharp center dot, which is 1 MOA at 8X. So it's a very, very small, very precise dot. A little bit too small, but we'll talk about that in just a minute. And then you have a slightly larger circle dot at 18 MOA. Now 18 MOA isn't really all that useful. There's no lightning cuts. There's nothing that draws your eye to the center. It's just a big circle. So there's no definition on it, and it's not that much bigger than the center dot. So it's not fast in close range, and it doesn't do anything at longer range. One thing that I will note is for drop compensation, you can use it, generally speaking, depending on your cartridge, depending on your barrel length, all that sort of stuff. 500 yards is generally anywhere from like 8 to 12 MOA. So with an 18 MOA dot, you know that that center line or that circle right below the reticle, right below the dot in line, is going to be 9 MOA. So that will get you really close at about 500 yards. And then if you're using a 5200, you're using the center dot. 300, you're aiming just above the center dot. 400, you're putting the circle, the bottom part of the circle, just below the target. And then at 500, depending on, again, your gun, ammo type, barrel, all that sort of fun stuff, you're putting the bottom curve part of the circle on the target. So it can be used at long range. The farthest that I took this scope out to was 300 yards. And of course, I'm just aiming slightly above the target to get good hits. Now, the rifle that it's on is my 12.5-inch AR-10. This is a very violent gun. It's not the most violent thing in the world, but certainly up there. I think it is the most violent gun that I own, but it's still not a terrible shooter. And just like all of my UTG 1-8s, it is held up just fine with no issues whatsoever. I never had any shift in zero under normal circumstances. And of course, I didn't have any degradation. The optic didn't break on me. It never failed on me, and I really didn't have any issues there. One more thing that I do want to note on the downside of the optic is that the brightness setting on the circle dot is too low. So now on the UTG 1-8, which I have one right here. So on the UTG 1-8 with the BG4 Reticle, which I have right here in my hand, on the green on the highest setting is daylight bright and very, very usable. Now you have a lot of hash lines and such that really draw your attention to the center dot. And on top of that, the center dot gets hot enough on max brightness to be used very, very quickly, almost like a red dot in close range. Now, the issue, of course, is that the circle dot reticle, because it illuminates both the center dot and the exterior ring, it's dim. And so on max setting for red or green or any color really, it just does not show up at all. And because one, the ring is very, very fine and the center dot is very small, and there's no big hash marks or anything that really draw your eye to the center, it makes it very, very hard to point it where you want it to go, because you can't really see the reticle in most circumstances, because that little black dot that you're looking for is very, very small, especially if you're in a dark environment or you have a dark background or anything like that. It's very, very difficult to find the reticle. So in close range, it makes it very obnoxious when most of the time you're hunting for where that reticle actually is at. Now, a simple fix for that would have just been to make that circle, the 18 MOA circle, make it a little bit bigger, maybe like a 20 MOA circle or 25, 30, something in that range, and make it a lot thicker with little hash marks leading into the center dot. So it's still unobstructed and you get a good field of view inside of the circle, but it really draws your eye to the center. And then maybe on top of that, turn up the brightness or only illuminate that center dot, so you have a very, very fine aiming point that is great for close range, because you have that big circle around there that's big and you can definitely pick up very fast against different backgrounds, and you have that really hot center dot. So that's what I would have preferred, and definitely would have been a huge improvement on here. And the reticle is just really simple and unfortunately not in a good way, and it's not bright enough to be usable in close range, and it doesn't have any ranging capabilities at longer range. So it doesn't really fit into any category. But again, remember, I picked the scope up for testing and review because it was on sale for 50 bucks, because I believe it was on like a closeout sale. They just weren't selling them, so they just wanted to push them out, and because they're essentially discontinuing them, hopefully for a redesign and a better reticle. Like I said, there's a lot of ways to make a better reticle for this in a circle dot style, but the one they chose is just too simple, doesn't have any features, and it doesn't illuminate bright enough, so it's basically unusable most of the time. Now, that being said, something that I am doing on all of my optics reviews is I am doing a drop test. So basically I had a 2/3 reduced IPSC target at 300 yards, so it's 12 by 20, I believe, and I zeroed it, so it was on point using just some M80 balls, so not super accurate ammunition, but I did a couple rounds just to verify that I was on target. I put them about 2 inches apart at 300 yards, so doing good there. Then I did a double drop test, so one on the top, one on the side, and of course you'll see that right here. Okay, it's dead on. It's dead on. Is this still recording?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna shoot one more. Those are like 2 inches apart. So drop number 1, shoulder height about 5 feet. And make sure your scope rings are tight, which they are. And then drop number 2 on the side, about 5 feet. All right, let's see if it held 0. All right, one more. I now do a zoom in on the target. So after a double drop test, one on top of the Optic, directly on top of the Optic, remember this is it's a short AR-10. It's only 12.5 inches, but it's not light. It's about 10.5, 11 pounds, depending on what I have on it at the time. And I did a test directly on top of the turrets, which are one of the weakest parts, and then one on the side. Now, the one on the side actually bent the front of the rail in. You can see my light is now pointed towards the muzzle device a little bit. So it actually bent the rail, which is funny, but the light and the mount that the light is on are actually still perfectly straight, so they're literally stronger than the rail, so I need to actually get a better rail on it. And after the double drop test, you can tell that they shifted up and left just the tiniest of bits, literally like 3 inches or 1 MOA at 300 yards, which for me is perfect. If I can get away with 1 MOA shift or less after a double drop test, which is, you know, about as bad as you can get on an Optic, you know, literally dropping it on the Optic itself twice, and you're getting 1 MOA shift, I think that's perfectly acceptable. So as far as the scope goes, the 1:8 with the circle dot reticle retains all of the good qualities of the BG4 reticle model, of course, except for the reticle. So you have a very durable design that's good for 308 recoil, it's good for drop test. At this point, I probably have 2,000 rounds of 308 through UTG 1:8s, not this one specifically, but all 3 of them that I have 2 BG4s and then 1 circle dot, and then multiple drop tests. So at this point, 6 or 7 drop tests, not to mention just hard wear and tear, as well as I had one on a 5.56 and I have one on an ACR right now, so maybe 3,000 rounds total, and I've never had an issue with any of them. So durability is there. I like the AccuSync mount as well that most of the time they come with. The eye box is really good at 1x. You can literally be 5.5, 6 inches back all the way up to like 3 inches, and you get a really good wide cone of vision that you can be in and still get a good sight picture. When you get up to 8x, which is actually fairly smooth, and one thing that I would like to see is I would like to see a throw lever, but they do have this raised nub, and it's a very, very smooth throw from 1 to 8. It's 180 degree throws, or 180 degree turn for 1 to 8. Very smooth. Now at 8x, your eye box does tighten up, but that is constant with all scopes. Any scopes that you get, the eye relief at the max magnification is going to be tighter and generally shorter than it is at its lowest magnification. The turrets are also a really nice addition for a lot of shooters. If you are doing long range and you're dialing a lot, they're really nice. Now for most people, when they buy a 1 to 8, they're generally speaking not going to need to dial, especially on the BG4 reticle version, which its BDC is great, especially for 5.56. I've taken that out to 500 yards, I want to say, with their BDC, at least 400. I did it in the 1 to 8 with the BG4 reticle in a 3-gun match, and it did just fine out to 400 yards with just 55 grain ammunition. But just the downside that I keep coming back to on this is that the reticle makes this scope a lot harder to use in every circumstance. Now, when you compare it for the price, if at the same price, of course, no questions, I would never buy it compared to the BG4 reticle or even a mil-dot scope, just because at least the mil-dot scope, it does lead your eye to the center, so it does at least make it a little faster up close, even though I really wouldn't use the mil-dot system. But the circle dot, just because the reticle itself is so small and it's not eye-catching whatsoever, and it doesn't get bright enough unless it's at dusk or something like that, that it makes it harder to use in every circumstance versus the BG4 or other reticle choices. So even for 50 bucks, I would rather spend 50 bucks on like a pair of iron sights or something like that, because those will work, and they will be, of course, easy to pick up, except in low light, where this will do a little better in low light. But I would rather have a pair of iron sights, a pair of decent iron sights that at least works, and I can, you know, get on target and be fast and have fun with. So really, when it comes down to it, for really any money other than free, it's really not worth it, and you should put your money into a better scope with a better reticle. Now, of course, the other 1 to 8s, I think they're all great. I use them all the time. I have a bunch of them, and they are my go-to recommended scope for $150 or less, really, or $200 or less, in some cases $250 or less for a 1 to 8 capability with a really good ballistic drop compensated reticle. I think that the UTG 1 to 8s are pretty much the best out there. Now, that being said, like I mentioned in the beginning of the video, this is one of the uppers that is up for giveaway. So this upper receiver, complete with the light, the iron sights, the BCM CAG foregrip, and the UTG 1 to 8 with the mount on it, is up for grabs. So this upper is one of the ones that you can do. Now, as I just crapped on this Optic for like 15 minutes, it's definitely not my favorite. So choose this one at your own peril or throw another optic on it. That being said though, that is pretty much the end of the video, guys. So thank you so much for watching. Hope you all enjoyed. Let me know what you guys think of this down below, or what you guys think of other cheap scopes that you have tried out. And I will see you guys in the next one. Peace off.
Hey you. Yeah, you. What are you still doing here? The video's over. Wait. Why are you still here? Like, share, and subscribe. Or don't. The choice is yours. But if you do subscribe, thanks. And I like pizza. Peace off.
There's a hit. That was good.
The guy's soaring over it.
I'm just aiming dead center, like literally just dead.
Oh yeah. I was just hitting high.
Okay.